These are important conversations to be having, because the only way that things begin to change about the way that we use our land, the way that we build relationship with the land that we live with, is by starting to question some of these systems. Right now, let's talk about some logistics. Let's talk about some logical things that will help us navigate the day-to-day. There are many sectors, many factions of engagement with the land that you can participate in, regardless of where you live. In a cityscape, the connection to nature is going to be an intentional action, right? Because this is where you're going to find trees that have been placed into places like mall parking lots. You're going to find landscaping practices to make areas look and feel a certain way. You're going to see plants that are not part of the original ecosystem, but introductions that can thrive there. You're also going to encounter animals and pets in the form of your neighbors and your community members. You're going to experience a variety of insect life that will either be inspiring because it's like a butterfly or a very beautiful moth, or it's going to feel like a nuisance, like a fly or an ant. Nature is always present, that you cannot escape it. So from there, we move into community park settings. So depending on where you live, you will likely have access to recreational areas, right? Parks and recreation. And these areas are largely designed to give families, to give people in the community a way to get closer to nature, to kind of step outside of the cityscape and to have a little bit of a break. So these are going to have a lot of amenities and facilities to entertain your children with playgrounds, or yourself, depending on your persuasions. They are going to have restrooms usually that have running plumbing for the toilets and the sinks. And you are likely to have grills and picnic tables or fields for playing games like baseball or basketball, things like this. From there, you move up into the state park level. So these are going to be more further removed from the city. They're going to take a little more effort to get to. And this is where you're going to start to find trail systems that are designed to give bikers, horseback riders, and hikers ways to maneuver through natural terrain without really having to think about it too much. Because many of the trails will guide you in terms of how far you can go and when you can make a choice about turning back to arrive back at your vehicle. And again, these spaces are going to have, at this point, we're talking outhouse style restrooms, so porta potties, and we're not going to see support for running water unless you happen to be in a campsite. Then you may have water hookups. So that's the other distinction, is that state park compared to community parks are where you're going to start seeing the ability to have overnight stays, camping, in naturescapes. From there, you can go into national forest land, which is where I happen to be today. And national forest land is the step above the state parks because it is overseen at a federal level, which means there should theoretically be more open, rugged terrain for you to hike, that you are not necessarily limited to predetermined trails, although there will be a good set of those for the hikers, the horseback riders, and the mountain bikers to engage with. By the time you're at the national forest, you also have expanded options like rock climbing. that won't be available at most state parks. So you start to see how the experiences shift and change, they morph and they grow. We also have a sector called the Bureau of Land Management. This is open source land that people can utilize for a variety of different reasons. When I was growing up, I understood BLM to be the land that cattle farmers often rented to graze their cattle. But it can be used for so much more than that. So BLM is another option when we're talking about connecting to wild spaces. And using the term wild spaces is the crux of this whole conversation. Building a relationship with the land in this day and age, in this country, in the United States of America, the North American continent, in many ways is very limited and very governed. There are certain things that you are expected to do and certain ways that you are expected to use the land. It is, after all, a concept of land management, resource management. This inadvertently ties into the concept of industry and business. These are important conversations to be having because the only way that things begin to change about the way that we use our land, the way that we build relationship with the land that we live with, is by starting to question some of these systems. That is where I will leave it today. Feel free to leave in the comments what comes up for you when you listen to this short explanation. Have I left anything out? What are places that you would like to talk about more in terms of engagement or understanding about how nature is accessible or inaccessible to certain populations? This is a very rich topic, and as such, it will be covered in a variety of very nuanced ways over time on this channel. I'm certainly not an herbalist. I'm certainly not an arborist. I'm certainly not one who is going to teach you how to survive off of the land. What I'm here to do is something very, very different. What I'm here to do is introduce a new way of understanding the concept of land back. It begins at the individual level. Yes, it would be nice if our governing agencies would modify things and reinstate power and knowledge and wisdom back to the populations that originally knew this land. And until we get to that point, there's so much that we can do outside of legislative bodies to begin shaping the way that we move. I am Jessica Radiance. This is the Rune Weaver. I'll see you again soon.